I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and expert in autoimmune disease. And I'm here with you today to discuss a topic which you might not commonly associate with an autoimmune condition, and that is endometriosis. But I have been seeing many more clients who have been diagnosed with endometriosis, and the research is evolving in this area. And what we once thought was a hormone issue is actually now being viewed more as an inflammatory condition. Ordinarily, if you get diagnosed with endometriosis, then you would go see a gynecologist, but the truth is focusing on your immune system and your inflammatory response is just as crucial as focusing on hormone balance. And the reason that I've called this episode Struggling with Period Pain is because a lot of people will be living with endometriosis and probably don't know that they have it. And of course, it doesn't mean if you have period pain, you have endometriosis. But if you are someone who dreads your period every month and you get a lot of pain, bloating, fatigue, then you're certainly not alone, but it might be worth exploring whether this is a factor for you. I think when it comes to the menstrual cycle, a lot of us will just put up with the symptoms and just think that that is who we are and that's what a cycle is like for us. But there might be more going on, and it's worth exploring that. So today we're going to explore the link between endometriosis and autoimmunity. I'm going to outline the common symptoms and potential root causes, and I'm going to finish off with some dietary and lifestyle recommendations that you can do to help manage your symptoms more effectively. But let's start by talking about endometriosis because it's a complex chronic condition where tissue similar but not identical to the lining of the uterus, which is known as the endometrium, starts to grow outside of the uterus. And these tissue deposits can be found on the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and then other surfaces of the uterus, bowel, bladder, and in some rare cases, even beyond pelvic cavity, like on the diaphragm or in the lungs. And unlike the uterine lining, which sheds during menstruation, these tissue growths have nowhere to go. So each month they respond to those hormonal changes. There can be bleeding internally, and it can trigger inflammation and scar tissue formation. And this can lead to that debilitating pain that you might be experiencing on a monthly basis. It can cause adhesions, which can affect lots of different areas in the body, especially the gut. And it can even cause fertility issues. Now, endometriosis has traditionally been viewed through the lens of reproductive health, and as I mentioned, is often managed by gynecologists using hormone-based treatments or surgery. But increasingly, we're seeing a new light, and it is being seen as a condition with a strong immune system involvement. So what does that mean? Well, research has shown that women with endometriosis often have signs of immune dysfunction, and this can include elevated levels of those pro-inflammatory cytokines. So cytokines are the chemical messengers that increase inflammation in the body, and we see these a lot with autoimmune conditions as well. And there is this link between endometriosis and autoimmune disease. And I've written an article on this, which I will link to in the show notes, because it's fascinating the similarities between both conditions. And it doesn't mean that endometriosis is an autoimmune disease, although I expect in the future many of the conditions that we don't consider autoimmune conditions might be classified that way. But what we can see are these similarities. And even when it comes to an autoimmune condition, when you look at somebody's genetics, if they have genetic variations in these cytokine genes, it means their cytokines are more heightened and they're more likely to get this pro-inflammatory cytokine response. It means their body is more likely to get inflammation, for example, when they're exposed to a virus or bacteria. And I don't mean when you're sick, I mean after the event, or when you get an injury, or when you do too much exercise. When you have issues with these pro-inflammatory cytokines, it means that you're more prone to inflammation when your body is under more stress, and more so than the next person. And they're genetics that I will look for when I am working with a client and I have a variation in one of my cytokine genes, and I'm sure that's a reason why I have had inflammation and autoimmune disease in the past. And now I know that, I manage that, and that's why knowing your genetics can be really insightful. And I will put the link to the genetic test that I run in my clinic, and it will give you a lot of information about not just your immune system, but your tendency when it comes to your hormones, and whether you're more likely to become, for example, estrogen dominant, or if you have issues with detoxification. So it's great information to have. And as I said, in endometriosis, they have shown these elevated pro-inflammatory cytokines which increase inflammation in the body, and as a result that might be a factor in this condition. As well as that, there are T cell abnormalities, and the T cells are an arm of the immune system which is responsible for targeting whatever the immune system will think it needs to target and get rid of in the body, and that in some instances might be self-tissue. But the T cells are also responsible for making sure your immune system stays tolerant to self-tissue, so to be able to identify self from non-self. And that is absolutely crucial when you have an autoimmune condition, but they have found these abnormalities in endometriosis as well. The presence of autoantibodies have also been shown in endometriosis, and those autoantibodies are the antibodies that give the instruction to the immune system to target a particular tissue or a particular part of the cell that we see in an autoimmune condition. So there are quite a lot of similarities between endometriosis and an autoimmune condition. And it goes back to the fact that the immune system has become overactive or misdirected. Interestingly, endometriosis frequently coexists with other autoimmune conditions, and studies have found significantly higher prevalence of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and celiac disease among women with endometriosis compared to the general population. The clusters of conditions suggest that there may be shared underlying mechanisms like genetic predisposition, chronic inflammation, gut permeability, and hormonal immune system crosstalk. In other words, endometriosis isn't just a hormonal condition, it's an inflammatory immune-mediated one, which is why women don't find long-term relief from hormone treatments alone. Understanding this opens up an entirely different approach to management, one that includes supporting immune balance, reducing systemic inflammation, healing the gut, and looking at the root cause behind immune dysregulation, all the things that we commonly focus on when it comes to an autoimmune condition. So the symptoms of endometriosis can be wide-ranging, and they're often misunderstood, not just by the general public, but sometimes even by healthcare professionals, and you might miss them yourself. As I said, you may have started your period in your teenage years, and you have just got used to what your cycle is like, and you just know that as your baseline. If you are in a lot of pain and you have been going to your doctor about things, well, because the symptoms are so varied and could also relate to lots of other things, it takes an average of 7 to 10 years for women to get a proper diagnosis. So let's break down some of the most common symptoms. Well, the first one, I'm sure you're not surprised by this, is severe period pain, which is also known as dysmenorrhea. And it's often the first red flag. But this isn't your typical cramping. It's the kind of pain that can be totally debilitating, keeping someone off work or curled up in bed with heat packs and painkillers every month. And I have a lot of clients, when we start working together, they're not able to go to work when they are having their period. They have to plan for it in advance. Some of them are staying in bed all day for a couple of days while they're having their period. They just can't do anything. And the great thing is, once we start working together and working on their underlying imbalances, including their gut health, making sure that they have sufficient nutrients, helping to calm down their stress response, they often find that their cycle gets a lot easier. They don't notice their symptoms as much, and they can maintain a normal life again. And that's huge. You know, sometimes clients come to me with more complex issues. Well, I say complex issues because I think all of our issues are complex, but a client might come to me with alopecia. We work on these underlying issues. We work on their menstrual cycle. And as much as they've come for their alopecia, we end up being able to resolve a lot of these other symptoms. So that just has a knock-on effect to everything. And the way that we live our lives and the way that we feel about ourselves makes a huge difference. And when you know every month that you're going to be in pain, that you're going to have to be in bed, that you are not going to be able to work as well, that is going to impact your life. So getting this right can make a big difference. Another symptom might be pain during intercourse, and that can be deep pelvic pain during sex, which can have a huge impact on your relationships and emotional well-being. So that's certainly one to look out for. Digestive issues like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, or nausea, especially around the time of menstruation, are also common. So common, in fact, that endometriosis is frequently misdiagnosed as IBS. But here's the difference. In endo, the gut symptoms often track with the menstrual cycle, worsening just before or during a period, which is why it's so important to track your cycle. There are some great apps that you can download now to track your cycle. The Aura Ring does it automatically, which I think is really helpful, and it will track your temperature. And you can just write down how you're feeling, what your symptoms are. And I'm sure if you are experiencing these types of symptoms, you're going to start seeing patterns. Another symptom would be fatigue and low energy, and they can feel like the kind of exhaustion which isn't relieved through sleep, a bit like chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is often linked to chronic inflammation, poor nutrient absorption, and hormonal imbalance. You might also experience pain during urination or bowel movements, particularly during menstruation. And what I find clients tell me is that it's a really sharp pain just before going to the toilet. And that can certainly be a sign that endometrial-like tissue is affecting the bladder or bowels. And this can be quite alarming and painful, but it's often overlooked and attributed to unrelated conditions. And then lastly, difficult conceiving or infertility can sometimes be the first sign of endometriosis for a woman, and it's estimated that up to 50% of women with infertility also have endo, though not all will have the obvious symptoms. And here's the thing, when it comes to this condition, it is so insidious that the severity of symptoms doesn't necessarily match the extent of the disease. And some women will have widespread endometrial implants and may have very mild symptoms or even none at all, while others will have minimal visible tissue growth and can experience excruciating pain and major disruption to life. And I expect that's to do with where the endometriosis is growing. But this disconnection is one of the key reasons why so many people are dismissed, misdiagnosed, or told it's just bad periods. And that's why you have to be an advocate for yourself. It's it's difficult, and I know it's getting more difficult, but I had to push so hard for every diagnosis that I got, for all the support that I got through the NHS. I had to push for it because my symptoms were dismissed. And I know in the end I took a more natural approach and I discovered nutritional therapy and functional medicine, and I'm so pleased I did. But in order to get seen and to be taken seriously, I did have to push for it. I did have to bring up, the health conditions that I'd experienced and the fact that I was actually doing so much for my health as well. It's unfortunate that it has to be that way, but if you're not pushing for your health, unfortunately, nobody else is going to. So that's why, if you feel like this is an issue for you, go get tested, go get checked. And you can also speak to your doctor and say that you suspect this, and they'll probably be thankful that you've gone and spoken to them about it. And I think we all know when things aren't right in our own body and we need to get it investigated. Too many of us are sitting at home with symptoms and not getting them looked into. And honestly, the longer you leave it, the worse things can get. So I don't want to be scaremongering here. I just want the best for you. And if you are experiencing any of this, you don't have to live this way. There are things that you can do. I've had clients even who have had severe endometriosis and they have had surgery, come out absolutely fine, and their pain has completely gone away. It's been life-changing. And then they're working with me to work on these underlying issues so that it doesn't come back. So let's talk about the link between endometriosis and iron deficiency, because this is another layer to consider and it is both common and clinically significant. So many women with endometriosis experience heavy or prolonged menstrual bleeding, known as menorrhagia, and this alone can lead to a gradual depletion of iron stores over time, especially if it's not being replenished adequately through diet or supplements. But there's more to it than just blood loss, and here's what we see. Chronic inflammation, which is central to endometriosis, can actually impair the body's ability to absorb and utilize iron effectively. And those inflammatory cytokines can increase levels of hepcidin, which is a hormone that blocks iron absorption and traps iron in storage, making it less available for red blood cell production, even when iron intake is adequate. This leads to something called a functional iron deficiency, where iron is present in the body but not accessible or usable due to inflammation. So someone might have, say, normal ferritin levels, but still experience symptoms of deficiency like fatigue, brain fog, hair loss, shortness of breath, or low exercise tolerance. And on top of that, women with endometriosis often follow restrictive diets in an effort to manage symptoms, sometimes unintentionally limiting those iron-rich foods, especially if they are plant-based, or avoiding red meat due to inflammation or ethical reasons. So iron is essential not just for energy and oxygen transport, but for immune function, thyroid health, and detoxification. And when levels are low, it can worsen fatigue, increase sensitivity to pain, and reduce resilience to stress and infection. All things that can be compounded in endometriosis symptoms. So if you're someone dealing with endo and persistent low energy or brain fog, it's worth checking your iron status. Ideally, a full iron panel, which includes ferritin, serum iron, transferritin saturase, and total iron binding capacity rather than just hemoglobin. And if you're somebody who is experiencing hair loss, ferritin and that total iron binding capacity, which is often referred to as TIBC, is essential to check. And it's not just all about ferritin. So make sure that you are getting all your markers checked when it comes to iron. And if iron is low, the next step is to understand why. Is it blood loss, inflammation, gut absorption, or a combination of all of those? And then support iron levels through nutrient-dense diet. You might want to consider supplementation and reducing inflammation at its root. And that leads us nicely on to the root causes of endometriosis and why it happens. And while there's no single known cause for endometriosis, what we do know is that it is multifactorial. This means there's no one root cause, it's a combination of systems breaking down over time, often starting years before symptoms become obvious. So here are the key factors we see contributing to the development and progression of endometriosis. The first is immune dysfunction, because in a healthy body, the immune system acts as a vigilant gatekeeper. If cells or tissues show up where they don't belong, it helps to clear them out. But in endometriosis, the immune system doesn't seem to recognize or eliminate the endometrial-like tissue that's growing inside the uterus. Instead, it allows it to stick, grow, and provoke chronic inflammation. And this immune dysfunction also means more inflammatory messengers like cytokines are circulating, contributing to pain and tissue damage. And you can refer back to the episode that I did on pain management, because when it comes to pain, inflammation is at the heart of a lot of the pain that we're feeling. So if we are able to bring down inflammation in the body, it can also help to manage our pain as well. And over time, this creates a cycle where the immune system is both underactive in some areas and overactive in others, which is a pattern we also see in autoimmune disease. And I know many people in the autoimmune space hate it when people say boosting the immune system. And I used to not like it either. But then I realized actually we do need to boost part of the immune system, because it is about some areas being underactive and other areas being overactive when it comes to an immune response in autoimmune disease. It's not just about an overactive immune response, it is also about immune suppression. I explain this to my clients, and I see it a lot in the testing that I run, like the stool test, that I would say over 50% of my clients are immune suppressed rather than inflamed. And that's because autoimmune diseases are linked to chronic infections. And when you are immune suppressed and you're exposed to these infections, they are more likely to grow in the body and create an inflammatory response. And that's almost what's happening with this endometrial tissue. It's being able to grow outside of where it should be growing, and the immune system is just ignoring it. And that is creating a problem. Another root cause is estrogen dominance. So estrogen is a key driver in the growth of the endometrial tissue. So it makes sense that higher levels or poor clearance of estrogen can worsen symptoms. This doesn't always mean you have too much estrogen overall, but it's the ratio between estrogen and progesterone. And when that is out of balance, your body isn't detoxifying or eliminating estrogen effectively. Now, the liver plays a huge role here. If your liver is sluggish from nutrient deficiency, toxin overload, or poor gut function, estrogen can be recirculated instead of excreted, and that can fuel the fire. And that's why the Dutch Plus hormone panel can be so insightful, especially for women who are in that perimenopause stage of life, because you are more prone to estrogen dominance. And what I find regularly is that clients in their late 30s, early 40s will have such a high amount of estrogen, and that is causing a lot of these symptoms. And there can be many reasons for that, but the liver is a key part of that, and normally there is something going on with liver detoxification which is contributing to that. So we need to make sure that we are looking at ways to balance our hormones and bring down estrogen where it's required. Another potential root cause is gut dysbiosis. And the gut isn't just about digestion, it's also central to hormone balance, immune regulation, and inflammation control. And when the microbiome is out of balance, something we call dysbiosis, it can lead to leaky gut, immune hyperreactivity, and increased systemic inflammation. One key player here is the estrobolome, the part of the microbiome involved in metabolizing estrogen. If it's imbalanced, it can reabsorb estrogen back into circulation, making estrogen dominance worse. Plus, people with endometriosis often report IBS-like symptoms, which might not be a coincidence. It could be rooted in compromised gut health. Next is toxic overload. We live in a world full of environmental toxins, many of which are endocrine disruptors. They're chemicals that interfere with hormone production, function, or detoxification. And these include BPAs from plastic, dioxins for industrial pollution, phthalates from cosmetics, and pesticides in food. And research has shown that women with endometriosis often have higher levels of dioxins and other hormone disrupting chemicals in their bodies. These toxins can alter immune responses and mimic estrogen, worsening the cycle of inflammation and tissue growth. And I will link to some information about ways that you can reduce your toxic load, especially when it comes to these endocrine disruptors. So you have a read of that and give some thought to it, because we all need to be lowering our burden of toxins, because they can easily build up in the body and create problems for us. Next is genetic predisposition. And yes, there are certainly genetic components when it comes to endometriosis. For example, if your mother or sister has it, then you are at a much higher risk. But genes aren't your destiny, which is why epigenetics is so important. And that is how your environment, stress levels, diet, and exposures influence the expression of those genes. So think about it this way: your genetics may load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. And that's why addressing lifestyle and environmental factors is so empowering. It gives you some control over how your body responds. And then lastly, the adrenal, stress, and HPA axis. Because when you are chronically stressed, it affects everything, as I'm sure you know, but especially your hormones and immune system. When your body is under constant stress, your adrenal glands release more cortisol, which over time can suppress immune function, contribute to gut permeability, and interfere with healthy estrogen and progesterone balance. This stress impacts your HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's the communication between your brain and adrenal glands. And when this becomes dysregulated, it can worsen fatigue, make pain feel more intense, and reduce your body's ability to heal or respond to other therapies. Stress isn't just in your head. It has biochemical consequences, especially in complex conditions like endometriosis. So bringing it all together, you can see why endometriosis is no longer viewed as a gynecological issue. It's an inflammatory, hormonal, immune-driven condition influenced by diet, lifestyle, environment, and genetics. And it's why a root cause whole body approach is essential for truly managing it beyond just symptom suppression. So what do you do from a dietary perspective if you have endometriosis? Well, let's talk about food, because what you eat can absolutely impact how you feel with endometriosis. My recommendations come from a root cause lens, focusing on reducing inflammation, supporting gut health, and balancing hormones. So the foods to prioritize are those anti-inflammatory fats, those from oily fish like sardines and mackerel, extra virgin olive oil, and chia and hemp seeds. Then there are the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, and cauliflower, and they support estrogen detox. And you can also get the broccoli sprouts or broccoli sprout powder, which have a more potent source of sulforaphane, which is the important component of these cruciferous vegetables when it comes to detoxification. Next is high fiber foods, because they help to eliminate excess hormones from the digestive tract. So think about lentils, flax seeds, and leafy greens. Then there are the antioxidant rich berries like strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, and they help to lower oxidative stress. You can also get a lot of these antioxidant rich berries in powders now, and that's another way that I like to take them. When it comes to gut health, if your gut is ready for it, bringing in some fermented foods like sauerkraut, kefir, and coconut yogurt with added probiotics in can help to support a healthy gut microbiome. For anybody that is based in the UK, I have started using Simprove again because I did a gut health test recently and my lactobacillus levels were low. And I will talk about that on another podcast of why that might be the case and why I have to continue to manage that for my own health. But I am currently going through the process with Simprove again, doing their protocol. It's so easy. You just take a 70ml shot of it in the morning and I'm already seeing a difference. I already feel better. It's strange, to be honest. I'm not seeing as much of a difference with my gut health, but I just feel so much more energized, and I assess that by how I'm feeling when I'm going to the gym or going out for a run. And if I don't feel like I want to stop, or I just feel like I can go faster, then I know I'm feeling pretty good because I do struggle a lot with running, but I push myself through, and I do feel better at the end of it. But at the minute, I definitely am feeling more energized. It could be the lighter evenings as well, but I am doing Simproof at the moment. So if you are based in the UK, Simproof have given me a discount of 50% off your first 3 month subscription using code AN50, and I will put more information about that in the show notes. But if you'd like to give it a try, I think out of all the probiotics, it's the one that I used when I wasn't working with a practitioner. And I think because it's a set protocol and you do it for a set period of time, I feel like you can really get the benefit from it. And I'm sure I am now going to keep cycling this. I won't do it all the time, but I'm just going to keep cycling this. But obviously, it's not for everybody. And if you are thinking about taking any supplements, always ask your health practitioner for further advice around that. The other thing that is worth prioritizing when it comes to your gut health is having things like bone broth, because bone broth has a lot of amazing amino acids in it that can support your gut health, but in particular your gut barrier function, which is so important when it comes to these types of inflammatory conditions. Now, when it comes to foods to avoid, many people with an autoimmune condition are sensitive to dairy and gluten, but not everyone. So it might be worth giving that a try. You can take it out your diet for say a month, and if you feel a lot better or your cycle improves, then you're going to know that that's a factor for you, and it might be worth investigating further. Then there is the refined sugars and ultra-processed carbs, which can fuel inflammation and are best avoided for lots of different reasons. And then any of the oxidized fats that we find, and that can be again in ultra-processed foods, it can be in processed meats, so it is best to avoid those because they can be inflammatory. And then lastly, alcohol and caffeine in excess can disrupt liver detox and hormonal imbalance. You know, I would always argue that coffee can be beneficial as well, but the truth is, for some people it probably is putting a burden on your detox pathways, and it can be to do with your genetics as well. And I recently ran a detox genetics panel for a client, and it's just so insightful because we know exactly which pathway we need to support, because there are different pathways when it comes to detoxification and different ways that your body can detox. So that's just a few things to think about when it comes to diet, when it comes to lifestyle. Again, it's the usual things that I talk about: the stress management, the movement, the making sure that you are optimizing your sleep as best as you can. Thinking about doing an environmental detox, so switching to those non-toxic skincare products, those cleaning products, using containers that are made of glass over plastic. Just these small changes can make such a big difference. Lately, I've got into a new routine. I'll be using my NeuroSym for stress management during the daytime. It helps me focus. And at nighttime, I'm using my Shakti mat, which is an acupressure mat. And it just really helps to calm down my nervous system on a night and just gives me that 15 minutes to myself. And I find some clients will tell me that they just fall asleep on the mat at the end of the day. That just shows it's helping. If you do want to learn more about those products, again, they will be in the show notes. As I've mentioned throughout, endometriosis is not just a hormonal issue. It's often an immune, inflammatory and metabolic issue too. That's why taking a root cause approach is so powerful. So if you've been struggling with pain, fatigue, and the emotional toll of this condition, know that there are ways to support your body that go beyond just painkillers and surgery. If you have any questions about this subject, feel free to pop over to my Instagram account, which is @the Autoimmunity Nutritionist, or head over to the Autoimmune Forum, which is my free group for those living with chronic symptoms and autoimmune disease. And at the beginning of April, I'm going to be running a juice challenge, the Spring Juice Reset. I'll be sharing more information about that soon, but feel free to join now. And I'll be running the challenge in the group. It's a lovely time of year to cleanse, to get ready for the spring, summertime. So I'd love to see you over there. If not, have a fantastic rest of your day and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time. And remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.